caught his maid secretly using his laptop. The millionaire was mad until he saw what she created. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is now. Subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The city outside began to dim, surrendering its vibrant energy to the approaching night. Inside, the relentless thrum of TechForge's servers filled the expansive office, a sound both constant and profoundly lonely. Ethan Stone, CEO, leaned back in his ergonomic chair, the day's victories tasting flat against a persistent, unsettling void. His gaze, usually sharp and decisive, drifted across his monitors, past the glowing lines of code, unable to truly settle. Months had passed since the cyber attack that nearly crippled his company, a crisis averted by an anonymous genius known only by the cryptic handle O. The brilliance of that code, the elegant, almost ethereal solution delivered in the dead of night, had haunted him. He craved to put a face to the name, to shake the hand of the mind that had moved with such unseen grace through his systems. It was a professional obligation, certainly, a need to understand and secure his company, but also a personal curiosity, a subtle ache for understanding that settled deep in his chest, a longing for an answer in a world of endless questions. Then, a change. A gentle whirring of wheels, barely audible above the server's drone, announced a different kind of presence. Olivia Hayes entered, a slender figure against the deepening twilight that filtered through the vast windows. She moved with a practiced, almost silent grace, pushing her cleaning cart. It was a symphony of soft clicks from the swiveling casters and the muted glide of polished plastic, barely disturbing the stillness. The faint scent of industrial disinfectant followed her, a stark, practical aroma against the sterile air of high-tech ambition. Her uniform, a simple, faded blue, seemed to absorb the lingering light, allowing her to almost blend seamlessly into the lengthening shadows that stretched across the empty cubicles. She was a presence rarely truly seen by the bustling daytime staff, a quiet shadow moving at the periphery of their awareness. But in this quiet evening, Ethan's attention, unbidden and sharp, shifted fully to her. Ethan's gaze, drawn by an unexpected stillness in her routine, lingered. Olivia paused near her workstation, her movements slowing, her usual swift efficiency replaced by a curious hesitation. Her eyes, typically downcast, now lifted, catching the soft glow of a monitor screen. Reflected, there were lines of intricate code, a complex digital tapestry. There was a yearning in that gaze, a profound familiarity that transcended mere curiosity. It was the look of someone who understood intimately. Her fingers, strong despite their worn appearance, hovered just above the keyboard, not to wipe but with a delicate precision, poised as if ready to compose a symphony of commands. Ethan's breath hitched. A jolt, sharp and sudden, coursed through him. He had dismissed the notion then. A janitor? Impossible. He recalled the frantic hours of the breach, the baffled faces of his top cybersecurity engineers. They had searched for days for a solution, only for OH to appear, deliver the elegant fix and vanish. Yet the precise elegance of that fleeting touch, the unique, almost artistic way those characters formed on the screen. It was an unmistakable signature. His mind reeled, sifting through vivid memories of the crisis, the intricate patterns of the OH code, the unusual logic that had baffled even the most seasoned experts. A wave of profound shock washed over him, a dizzying realization that the anonymous savior of TechForge, the digital ghost who had moved with such unseen grace through his systems, had been here all along, quietly sweeping his floors, hiding brilliance in plain sight. Olivia, sensing the seismic shift in his attention, straightened. Her dark, perceptive eyes, usually veiled, now met his directly. There was no surprise in them, no sudden alarm, only a knowing acknowledgement. A deep, unwavering light that seemed to pierce through the twilight and directly into Ethan's newly tumultuous thoughts. Her face remained impassive, her posture humble, but her gaze held a profound, unspoken truth. It seemed to say, "You see me now, the true me, unadorned by expectation or disguise." The air in the office thickened, charged with a silent revelation. Ethan felt a wave of incredulity, followed by a dizzying recalibration of his entire worldview. The cleaning cart whirred softly past his door, a mere whisper in the vast silence, leaving behind not just clean floors, but the unsettling, exhilarating echo of a profound discovery. The ordinary moment had fractured irrevocably, revealing a quiet, extraordinary truth that promised to redefine everything. The image of Olivia Hayes, the humble janitor, And the ghost of the OH code fused in Ethan Stone's mind, a contradiction that clawed at his sense of order. The city beyond TechForge's windows had long gone to sleep, yet Ethan remained, pacing his office. The stark contrast was a relentless torment, her simple uniform against the intricate logic of a system-saving algorithm. How could such brilliance exist in such a hidden, overlooked corner? He needed answers, not from mere curiosity, but from a profound, unsettling sense of imbalance, a dissonance in the very fabric of his world. He opened old security logs, his fingers flying across the keyboard, cross-referencing network access times with janitorial shifts. It was a digital ghost hunt, relentless and quiet, a methodical search for an explanation to the impossible. The timestamps aligned, chillingly so. Access granted to OH during late-night hours, precisely when Olivia would be cleaning. The digital breadcrumbs were scattered across months of logs, previously dismissed by busy minds. But now they screamed with undeniable truth. He felt deep shame for his earlier blindness, a self-reproach for the unseeing eyes of privilege that had passed her by day after day. He had looked, but had not seen. Now he could not unsee. The next evening, the silence of the nearly deserted office felt heavier, pregnant with unspoken questions. Ethan lingered by the deserted coffee station, feigning an interest in a stale report, his gaze fixed on the entrance. Olivia arrived, her presence a soft current in the vast space, quietly wiping down the counters with meticulous care. The methodical rhythm of her cleaning filled the void between them. "Olivia," Ethan began, his voice softer than usual, the corporate edge entirely absent. I was hoping to catch you. I noticed something yesterday." Her hand, which had been methodically wiping a stainless steel surface, stilled mid-motion. She didn't look up immediately, but a subtle tension gripped her shoulders. "Yes, Mr. Stone?" Her voice was low, polite yet unyielding, a guarded fortress of sound. Your work, it's very thorough," he offered, fumbling for an entry point into the conversation he truly sought. "But I was curious, before this, what did you do? Your skills, they seem quite exceptional." He watched for a tell, a subtle shift in her composed demeanor. He caught it, a fleeting tightening around her lips, a slight tremor in her hand as it gripped the rag, then a subtle clenching of her jaw. A wave of caution emanated from her. "I worked in tech, long ago," she conceded, her voice barely a whisper, as if speaking a forbidden truth. Her gaze drifted, momentarily catching on a framed photo on a nearby desk. A smiling young boy, perhaps her son, Leo. A wave of deep yearning washed over her face, a passing ache of absence that pierced the quiet of the room. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, swallowed by her practiced control, a mask swiftly reapplied. "Tech?" Ethan seized the thread, his own pulse quickening with the scent of a deeper story. "What kind of tech? Development?" A pause ensued, heavy and long, stretching between them like a taut wire. The distant hum of the city seemed to amplify the silence. "Software," she confirmed. The single word, a heavy stone dropped into a still pond, sending ripples of curiosity through Ethan. Ethan's mind raced, connecting dots, chasing fragments of information he'd heard over the years. Was it a large company? He tried to sound casual, but his heart beat a quick rhythm against his ribs. The possibility, the growing dread, was immense. Olivia finally met his gaze again. This time her eyes held a weariness he hadn't noticed before, a deep sadness that seemed to stretch back years, etched by unseen burdens. She turned back to the counter, her movements stiff, almost robotic. "A long time ago, before things changed." He pushed gently. "I'm trying to understand, Olivia. TechForge recently faced a serious threat. An anonymous developer saved us. Their work, it had a certain signature, a brilliance I've rarely seen." He let the words hang, a silent invitation, a desperate plea for explanation. Her hand paused mid-wipe. A fragile stillness settled over the space, thicker than the dust she cleared. Then, in a voice barely audible, a voice laced with a raw, almost physical pain, she said, "Sometimes doing what is right comes at a cost." "What cost?" Ethan asked, his voice low, urgent, unwilling to let the moment slip, sensing a profound truth on the precipice of revelation. "Where were you before, Olivia? What was the company's name?" She drew a breath, the air seemingly catching in her throat, a profound reluctance in her very posture. "Veridian Dynamics," she murmured, the name a whisper, as if speaking it aloud caused her physical pain. It was a company Ethan knew, a company his estranged father had founded, a name synonymous with ruthless efficiency and unshakable power, a name that carried its own complex and often ruthless shadows. The revelation hit Ethan like a soft blow to the chest, but one that resonated to his core. Veridian Dynamics, his father's empire. The connection solidified, unsettling, and immediate. He wanted to ask more, to demand every detail of that hidden past, but the look in Olivia's eyes stopped him. They were pools of quiet pain, a lifetime of burdens unspoken, a story too heavy for simple words. The truth of why she was blacklisted, the full, devastating narrative of betrayal and professional ruin at the hands of the company his father built, remained hidden. It was a song caught in the throat, a melody of suffering left unsung, yet its presence resonated profoundly in the quiet space between them. Ethan was left with the chilling knowledge that Olivia's struggles were, in a convoluted way, irrevocably tied to his own blood. The name Veridian Dynamics lingered in the quiet office air, an echo that resonated with a disquieting familiarity in Ethan Stone's mind, his father's company. The revelation had settled deep within him, heavy and unsettling, a stain he hadn't known was there until now. He watched Olivia Hayes, her back to him, her movements now rigidly mechanical as she polished the glass partition. The ease he had felt moments before had shattered. In its place, a complex web of familial history and professional injustice began to unravel, pulling him into its intricate threads. Veridian Dynamics, Ethan repeated, the name tasting foreign on his tongue, like something he should spit out. He tried to keep his voice level, but a distinct tremor of disbelief ran through it, betraying the turmoil within. My father founded that company, Olivia. Why were you there? Olivia turned slowly, her face a mask of carefully constructed composure. Yet, her intelligent, wounded eyes betrayed a brief flash of surprise, a momentary lifting of her guard. She hadn't known his connection to Veridian. The twist of fate, the cruel irony of their interwoven pasts hung palpable between them, a thread spun of betrayal and unwitting inheritance. She took a moment, a barely perceptible breath. Then her shoulders settled, a silent decision made. I was the lead developer there, Mr. Stone, she stated, her voice quiet but firm, devoid of overt emotion, like a stone skipping across a still pond. Her gaze drifted, momentarily catching on the silent cityscape beyond the window, as if drawing strength from its vastness. Many years ago, before they moved in a different direction, a direction I could not follow. A different direction, Ethan pressed, his questions coming faster now, urgent with a need to understand. He stepped closer, drawn into the gravity of her confession. What happened, Olivia? Why are you here? The words hung heavy, laden with the profound weight of her current reality, the stark contrast to her hidden genius. She hesitated, her hands resting lightly on the cleaning cart, a subtle clenching of her fingers revealing a tremor beneath her calm exterior. The story, when it finally emerged, was delivered with calm resolve, each word measured, almost detached, yet imbued with the profound, etched pain it carried, like a faded photograph held up to the light, its details sharp despite the passage of years. I discovered a back door, she began, her voice gaining a slight, almost imperceptible tremor as she recounted the technical details, the precise lines of code. In the core billing system, it wasn't a flaw, it was deliberate, designed to redirect funds, small amounts at first, but systematically, consistently, siphoning them into untraceable accounts. It was a sophisticated scheme, hidden deep within layers of seemingly innocuous code. It was unethical, illegal, a betrayal of every user, every client. Her eyes, though still distant, held a sharp, piercing clarity as she spoke of the violation, a fire that had not been extinguished. Ethan felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach, a visceral clenching that mirrored the shame brewing within him, his father's company. This kind of shadow operation, the ruthless, behind-the-scenes machinations for illicit gain, was precisely the kind of rumor that had always clung to his father's name, though never proven. Now it was etched in Olivia's quiet testimony, undeniable and real. The weight of his family's past, which he had tried so hard to outrun with TechForge's ethical vision, suddenly became concrete. I reported it, Olivia continued, her gaze now fixed on some distant point, reliving the moment with stark precision. Through the proper channels, I documented everything. I believed in integrity. I believed they would fix it, that justice would prevail. I was naive. A self-deprecating, almost bitter smile touched her lips before vanishing, replaced by a grim, resolute line. They silenced me. What happened? Ethan urged, Stepping closer, his corporate facade cracking to reveal a man genuinely disturbed, a son reeling from the unexpected revelation of a hidden family stain. The air crackled with the unsaid, the lingering echoes of her ordeal. I was dismissed, accused of insubordination, of fabricating evidence, of being a disruptive influence. They spun a web of lies so tight, so pervasive, there was no escaping it. My professional reputation was systematically dismantled. Then the blacklisting began. My name was circulated among every major firm. My calls went unanswered. My applications vanished into an abyss. It was swift, absolute. Her voice was soft, but the words were sharp, piercing the quiet air with the blunt force of injustice, leaving no room for doubt. One day I was a respected developer at the forefront of my field. The next, I couldn't get an interview for a junior position. My son, Leo, he was young. I needed to provide for him, so I took the only work I could find, cleaning. Ethan stared at her, a profound stillness enveloping him, broken only by the faint hum of distant servers. The familiar face of his janitor, the one he had seen almost daily, was suddenly transformed. He saw not just Olivia Hayes, the silent worker, but Olivia Hayes, the wrong truth-teller, the brilliant mind sacrificed on the altar of corporate greed, a greed intrinsically tied to his own lineage. The weight of his father's actions, once abstract rumors, now became a tangible personal burden, settling heavily upon his shoulders, a shame that felt acutely his own. He saw the deep fortitude she carried, an unyielding spirit that had faced overwhelming injustice and refused to break, a stark contrast to the ruthless machinations of the world that had cast her aside. The realization settled in his chest, heavy and undeniable. His father, his legacy. It wasn't just about anonymous acts of corporate malfeasance anymore. It was about her. Olivia, the woman standing before him, her past intricately woven with his own, like familiar threads seen anew under starlight. He had built TechForge on a promise of innovation and ethics, a silent rebellion against his father's methods. Now he understood the true cost of that rebellion, seeing the victim of his family's shadow right before his eyes. The delicate truth had pierced him, reshaping his entire view of Olivia and profoundly his view of himself. The quiet office, once just a workplace, suddenly felt like a crucible of shared, painful history, binding them in a way neither could have foreseen. The silence that followed Olivia's confession was not empty, but thick with unspoken history, a heavy shroud woven from betrayal and the long shadow of Veridian Dynamics. Ethan Stone stood transfixed, the polished gleam of the office around him fading into insignificance. His father's name, once a symbol of formidable success, now tasted like ash, bitter and cold on his tongue. Olivia, the humble janitor, was not just a victim. She was a living testament to the very darkness he had sought to escape by founding TechForge. The sheer weight of that truth settled on him, a burden far heavier than any corporate challenge he had ever faced. He looked at her, truly looked, and saw not a cleaner, but a woman of immense strength, her inherent dignity forged in the crucible of injustice. The clear brilliance he'd sensed, the unique OH signature, now pulsed with a new, profound meaning. It wasn't just about saving his company, it was about the resilience of a spirit that had faced overwhelming forces and refused to be extinguished. A deep, almost physical ache of shame for what had been done, for the years stolen, for the talent forced into hiding, tightened in his chest. He felt a profound sense of shared responsibility, a burden passed down unknowingly through generations. "Olivia," Ethan said, his voice husky, stripped of its usual corporate polish, raw with genuine anguish. I had no idea. What you went through, it's unforgivable. I am truly sorry." The inadequacy of the words hung in the air, a whisper against the storm within him, a futile attempt to mend a wound so deep. She offered no reply, only a slight, almost imperceptible nod, her gaze fixed on a distant point, as if the past still held her captive. He saw the faint lines of weariness around her eyes, the subtle tension in her shoulders that spoke of years carrying this heavy, silent burden alone. It was a posture of quiet endurance, etched by time. A fierce resolve began to stir within Ethan, a storm gathering beneath his composed exterior. This was more than a professional injustice. It was a deeply personal one, now connected to his own lineage, a direct consequence of his family's shadow. He thought of his own aspirations for TechForge, a company built on transparency and ethical innovation, a stark contrast to the shadowy dealings of Veridian Dynamics. This wasn't just about fixing a past wrong. It was about defining his own legacy, stepping out of his father's long, dark shadow. The path forward became clear, compelling, a beacon in the complex darkness. "Olivia," he began again, his voice firming, imbued with a new sense of purpose. "TechForge needs you, not as a janitor. I need you." He paused, choosing his words carefully, the weight of the moment pressing upon him. "I want you to lead our new AI-driven security project, the one that was conceived after the breach you averted. You're the one who saved us. You're the one who understands these systems, these vulnerabilities, in a way no one else here does. Your insight is invaluable, unique, forged in a crucible of experience no one else possesses." Her head snapped up, her eyes widening in genuine surprise. A rare crack in her stoic facade, a fragile hope, quickly veiled, sparked in their depths. "Mr. Stone, I haven't coded professionally in years, and my name, my past." Her voice trailed off, laden with the weight of her blacklisting. "The industry doesn't forget. They blacklisted me completely. It's a risk, a very high one for you." "No," Ethan countered, his voice resolute, meeting her gaze with an unwavering conviction. "But I do, and TechForge will. We'll find a way. We'll start discreetly if we have to, as a technical advisor, an anonymous consultant even, until we can properly clear your name. Your talent, Olivia, it's too vital to remain hidden, to be lost to injustice. It's too important to be denied." He thought of the deep satisfaction he'd felt when he first envisioned TechForge as a place of genuine merit, where talent was valued above all else. This felt like the true embodiment of that vision, a chance to redeem not just her name, but a piece of his own world, a silent vow to rectify the past. He saw the spark of hope in her eyes, quickly followed by the familiar shadow of apprehension. Years of rejection had etched deep lines of caution into her soul. "It's a risk, Mr. Stone, for you, for your company, a big one. The industry talks." "Some risks are worth taking," Ethan said, stepping fully into the moment, his decision clear and absolute. "Especially when it's about doing what's right, about correcting a profound wrong." He remembered an implicit yearning he'd always harbored, to truly make a difference, to build something that stood for integrity, to redeem in some small way the family name that felt tarnished by his father's actions. This single act, this offer to Olivia, wasn't just about her. It was about his own profound desire for his family's name to stand for integrity, finding a deeper meaning in righting a historical wrong that now felt acutely his own. It was a path towards his own liberation. He extended his hand, not as a CEO to an employee, but as one human to another, a gesture of solidarity, an invitation to a new path. His touch was firm, yet gentle. "Will you consider it, Olivia? Will you give TechForge and yourself a second chance at what was unjustly taken?" Olivia looked at his outstretched hand, then back into his eyes. In them, she saw not pity, but genuine respect and a rare, subtle sense of shared purpose that warmed her. The heavy shroud of her past, for the first time in years, felt a fraction lighter, as if a great weight had been momentarily lifted from her shoulders. The office lights hummed softly around them, bearing witness to a silent pact, a turning point in two intertwined lives that stretched beyond the confines of the present moment, towards a horizon neither had dared to imagine. The acceptance wasn't immediate, nor was it a grand pronouncement. Olivia Hayes simply met Ethan Stone's gaze, a flash of raw vulnerability in her eyes, and nodded once. It was a subtle agreement, a shared whisper in the quiet expanse of the office, yet it resonated with the force of a tectonic shift. The next few weeks at TechForge became a silent ballet of change, a testament to Ethan's firm resolve and Olivia's careful reemergence into a world she thought had forsaken her. Ethan moved with efficient speed, a strategist orchestrating not just a project, but a quiet revolution. He carefully introduced Olivia to his core team, not as the new hire, but as an anonymous technical advisor, leveraging the mystique of OH to shield her identity while her name remained under scrutiny in the wider industry. He tasked her with evaluating the company's entire security infrastructure, a sprawling, intricate web of data and access points, ripe for a master's touch. She worked from a secure, isolated terminal, her brilliance once again unfettered, a caged bird finally given back its sky, its wings testing the air. Olivia, for her part, approached the task with fierce, deep intensity. The initial rust of disuse quickly flaked away, revealing the keen edge of her analytical mind. Her fingers, once accustomed to the rough surface of cleaning carts, now danced across the keyboard with a forgotten grace, charting pathways through complex algorithms. She moved through lines of code like a sculptor, chiseling away vulnerabilities, her focus absolute. Ethan observed her, often from the quiet remove of his office, a profound sense of vindication settling in his chest. He saw the subtle transformation in her posture, the way her shoulders seemed to uncoil, losing the habitual slump of resignation. Her movements gained fluidity, a new sense of purpose. The focused light that returned to her eyes when immersed in her work spoke volumes of a soul finding its true current, a deep contentment finally taking root. Their interactions, initially formal and guarded, softened into a quiet rhythm. Early mornings often found them alone in the vast office. The only sounds the soft click of keys and the murmur of their voices discussing encryption protocols and algorithmic efficiencies. Their dialogue was understated, yet rich with mutual respect and a burgeoning understanding that transcended professional boundaries. Ethan learned of her meticulous nature, her uncanny ability to spot obscure patterns, her deep joy in problem-solving. Olivia, in turn, began to see past the CEO's polished exterior, observing his genuine passion for ethical innovation, his deep frustration with systemic injustices, and a nascent, almost paternal protectiveness toward his company and its people. A subtle bond, yet syllable bond, like twin roots seeking water, began to form, strengthening with each shared challenge. One particularly late night, the city lights blurring beyond the windows, Olivia discovered a subtle, deeply embedded flaw in a legacy system, a vulnerability that could have been catastrophic if exploited. It was a phantom, almost undetectable, capable of siphoning vast amounts of data without a trace. She brought it to Ethan, her voice low, precise, detailing the exploit vectors with chilling accuracy. Ethan listened, his gaze unwavering, a thrill of confirmation running through him. "Brilliant, Olivia," he murmured, genuine admiration lacing his voice. "Absolutely brilliant. You found what no one else, not even our top teams, suspected." The words, simple as they were, landed softly in Olivia's heart, a balm to wounds she hadn't realized were still festering so deeply. It was the recognition she hadn't received in years, the validation that had been cruelly denied. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, fleeting yet profound. A glimpse of the peace her soul truly yearned for, a fleeting sunbeam after a long storm. Yet, as the gentle current of their connection deepened and Olivia's influence grew, the outside world began to stir. Whispers, like faint ripples on a still pond, reached Ethan's ears. Logan Pierce, TechForge's COO, a man of sharp angles and sharper ambition, harbored a quiet skepticism that morphed into calculated suspicion. He had been discreetly investigating the anonymous technical advisor, his inquiries subtle but persistent, fueled by a corporate caution that bordered on outright paranoia and a desire for control. One afternoon, Logan entered Ethan's office, a file clutched in his hand, its pages stark white against his dark suit. "Ethan," he began, his tone deceptively casual yet laced with an icy undertone, "I've been looking into our new advisor. There are some anomalies. A woman named Olivia Hayes seems she has a rather checkered past with Veridian Dynamics." His cold, calculating eyes met Ethan's, holding a distinct challenge, daring him to deny the evidence. "Blacklisted, I believe, for insubordination. Accusations of internal sabotage. It's all here." He tapped the file. The air in Ethan's office grew taut, charged with unspoken accusation. He met Logan's gaze steadily. "Olivia Hayes is exceptionally talented, Logan. Her past is complex and, frankly, irrelevant to her current contributions." He felt a defensive surge, a protective instinct he hadn't anticipated, rising unbidden in his chest, hot and fierce. Logan's smile didn't reach his eyes. It was a thin, joyless line. "Complexity can be a liability, Ethan, especially in a public company. What would the board say? What would our investors say if they knew we had someone with that history advising our most critical security project? It reeks of bad judgment. And worse, it opens us up to scandal, a very public, very damaging scandal." His words were precise, each one a strategic arrow. The triumph Ethan had felt, seeing Olivia thrive, now tasted bitter. Logan's words, sharp and precise, struck a nerve. While Olivia's professional isolation was slowly healing, the deeper wound of public perception, the persistent societal skepticism, and the quiet doubt she still carried within her soul resurfaced. It was like a hairline crack appearing in a seemingly placid village well, threatening to shatter the fragile peace they had built. The fight, Ethan realized, was far from over. It was merely shifting its battleground from the quiet hum of servers to the harsh glare of public judgment. Logan Pierce's words hung in the air, cold and calculated, casting a sudden chill over Ethan Stone's office. The mention of the board of investors was a strategic strike, aimed directly at Ethan's carefully constructed vision for TechForge. Ethan felt a familiar tightening in his jaw, a muscle memory from countless boardroom skirmishes. But this time, the stakes were profoundly personal. They involved Olivia Hayes and the justice she deserved. He met Logan's unblinking stare. Olivia's past is a testament to her integrity, Logan. She exposed corruption, and she paid a price for it, a price unjustly exacted by Veridian Dynamics. The name of his father's company, once avoided, now spilled from his lips with a newfound defiance, a challenge to the very shadows of his lineage. Logan scoffed, a dry, dismissive sound. Integrity or insubordination, Ethan? The narrative depends entirely on who's telling the story, and right now the industry has a very clear story about Olivia Hayes. Bringing her into the fold, especially in such a critical, anonymous capacity, is a reckless gamble, a public relations nightmare waiting to happen. His voice held an edge of condescending certainty, implying a weakness Ethan could not afford. The confrontation, while hushed, crackled with tension. Ethan knew Logan was right about the optics, about the perception of risk. But he also knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in his bones, that Logan was fundamentally wrong about Olivia. He thought of her clear brilliance, the hours she poured into ensuring TechForge's security, the subtle changes in her demeanor as she rediscovered her purpose. This wasn't a gamble, it was an investment in true talent, a rectification of profound injustice, a silent vow to build something truly honorable. "This isn't up for debate, Logan," Ethan stated, his voice low, firm, leaving no room for argument. "Olivia Hayes remains with TechForge. Her contributions are invaluable, indispensable, even to the very future of this company." Logan's eyes narrowed, a flicker of a genuine frustration crossing his face, his composure momentarily cracking. "Then you leave me no choice but to bring this to the board's attention. Officially, they have a right to know who is handling their most sensitive projects, especially someone with that kind of history." He spun on his heel and exited, leaving behind a silence more menacing than his words, a promise of impending storm. Ethan knew the battle lines had been drawn. He had protected Olivia's anonymity for as long as he could, but Logan's ambition had forced his hand. He walked to the secure terminal where Olivia often worked, her screen now dark, a phantom glow remaining in the space. He needed to tell her, not with words of comfort, but with the stark, unvarnished truth of the fight ahead. He found Olivia in the break room, quietly cleaning the coffee machine. The soft whirring sound filled the air. She looked up as he entered, a question in her intelligent eyes. He saw the faint traces of the life she'd endured, her unyielding spirit tempered by years of hardship. "Olivia," he began, his voice devoid of pretense, straightforward and firm. "Logan Pierce knows about you, about Veridian Dynamics. He intends to go to the board." Her shoulders stiffened imperceptibly. A shadow of old fear, a cold specter of the past, crossed her face, briefly dimming the light in her eyes. The strength she had painstakingly rebuilt threatened to fracture under the weight of the coming storm. "I knew this day would come," she murmured, her voice thin, a mere wisp of sound. "I told you it was a risk, Mr. Stone. For you, for TechForge, for everything we've built." "It is," Ethan conceded, his gaze steady, unwavering. "But we will face it. Together." He paused, then made the decision that would alter both their paths irrevocably, a bold stroke in the quiet war for truth. "I can't let him control the narrative, Olivia. It's time we tell your story, our story, publicly. We will face them head-on, in the light." Her eyes widened, a fragile hope mixing with profound apprehension. The audacity of his plan seemed to stun her into momentary silence. "Publicly? My name, it's been tainted for so long. People believe the worst. They won't listen. It will only bring more pain." "Then we change what they believe," Ethan affirmed, his resolve hardening, setting like stone. "TechForge owes you that, and the industry needs to hear the truth. That true talent and integrity cannot be suppressed forever. Not by any company, not by any person, no matter how powerful." He saw the unspoken question in her eyes. "Why go so far for me?" He didn't answer aloud, but his gaze conveyed the deep conviction that this was not just about her vindication, but about his own quiet fight against the shadows of his past, a fight that now found its battleground in the public arena. The day of the press conference dawned, crisp and bright, a stark contrast to the internal turmoil both Ethan and Olivia felt. The TechForge auditorium buzzed, packed with reporters, their cameras flashing, their questions like agitated bees. Logan Pierce sat in the front row, his expression carefully neutral, yet his gaze held a distinct, calculating challenge, waiting to witness their public stumble. Ethan stepped onto the stage, a calm strength radiating from him. He spoke of TechForge's commitment to security, to innovation, his voice resonating with quiet authority. Then, his tone gaining power, he shifted. Months ago, TechForge faced a crisis, a devastating security breach. We were saved by an anonymous architect, a brilliant mind known only as OH. He paused, letting the words hang in the air, creating a dramatic, expectant hush. Today, I am honored to introduce you to the true identity of OH, the person who not only saved TechForge, but has since revolutionized our entire security infrastructure. He turned, extending his hand to Olivia, who stood quietly backstage. She walked forward, her movements slow, deliberate, her eyes meeting the sea of flashing lights with unwavering resolve. She was dressed simply, elegantly, her hair pulled back, revealing the intelligence in her features, a portrait of quiet grace. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan announced, his voice ringing with conviction, "this is Olivia Hayes." A collective gasp swept through the room, followed by a cacophony of camera clicks and shouted questions. The industry knew the name, but not the face, not the true story behind the blacklisting. Logan Pierce's face, for the first time, showed a flash of genuine shock, his composure momentarily fractured by the sheer audacity of the reveal. Olivia stepped to the podium, her hand resting lightly on its surface, a steady anchor. She drew a breath, the world's gaze fixed upon her. "For years," she began, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the noise, "my name has been associated with insubordination and sabotage. Today, I stand before you to tell you the truth." She spoke of the backdoor at Veridian Dynamics, of her decision to expose it, of the ruthless retaliation that followed. She spoke not with bitterness, but with a calm, factual recounting of injustice, her words carrying the undeniable weight of personal experience, silencing the room. The room fell into an uneasy silence as she finished. The reporters, accustomed to bombast, were disarmed by her quiet fortitude. What they sought, a sensational scandal, a dramatic confession, was not what they found. Instead, they found a deep strength, a profound dignity, and an undeniable truth. Ethan watched her, a surge of pride swelling in his chest. He saw that she was not merely seeking vindication, but reclaiming her narrative, forging her own path, leading to an unexpected home. The path they had taken, fraught with uncertainty, had led them here, not to a simple victory, but to a deeper, shared understanding, a reckoning that transcended mere corporate battles. The dust of public scrutiny, once a suffocating cloud, slowly began to settle. The inherent dignity of Olivia Hayes' words at the press conference had resonated, like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples of understanding that spread beyond the immediate headlines. The narrative shifted. News outlets, initially drawn to scandal, now spoke of resilience, of hidden genius, of a wrong finally being righted. Olivia's name, once synonymous with accusation, now gleamed with the soft light of vindication, a quiet beacon for those who sought justice. Logan Pierce's attempts to stir doubt among the board, already weakened by the swift shift in public perception, found no purchase against Ethan Stone's steadfast leadership and Olivia's undeniable achievements. His influence, like a shadow at noon, began to recede within TechForge, his calculated ambitions quietly thwarted, leaving the path clear. At TechForge, the transition was swift, yet imbued with grace. Olivia stepped into her role as Chief Technology Officer, her brilliance unrestrained, finally given the space to bloom. She moved through the high-tech corridors with a newfound composure, her mind unfurling its full capacity. One morning, Ethan watched from his office as she led a team meeting, her voice calm and assured as she articulated complex cybersecurity strategies. Her colleagues listened with rapt attention, a testament to her triumph. The lines of code she commanded were not just symbols, they were pathways to a more secure future, crafted by hands that knew the true cost of hidden vulnerabilities. Her presence radiated an inner strength, a profound sense of purpose that Ethan had always envisioned for his company's core. Ethan, watching her, felt a profound sense of completion. The burden he had unknowingly carried, the shadow of his father's unethical legacy at Veridian Dynamics, began to dissipate. Seeing Olivia thrive, seeing her talent recognized and celebrated, was more than a professional victory. It was a deeply personal redemption. He knew his father, in his solitary world, must have witnessed the dawn break over Olivia's name, a silent reckoning for a past that could no longer hide. His own unwavering stance had, in its own way, begun a lasting shift, cementing his legacy of integrity. Months flowed by like a quiet stream, marking the passage of their newfound peace. The intensity of corporate life, the hum of innovation at TechForge, continued unabated. Yet for Olivia and Ethan, a different rhythm had begun to emerge, one woven with moments of shared quiet. One sun-dappled afternoon, a rare pause in their busy lives, found them far from the glass and steel of the city, trading the urban clamor for the sprawling green embrace of Central Park. The air, scented with fresh-cut grass and distant blossoms, felt lighter here. Leo, Olivia's son, a whirlwind of youthful energy, darted ahead, his laughter like chimes carried on the gentle breeze. He chased pigeons, his small hands reaching for the elusive birds, his joy pure and unbridled. Olivia watched him, a soft, unburdened smile gracing her lips, a look of deep contentment in her eyes that spoke of profound peace. Ethan walked beside her, his hands clasped loosely behind his back, his gaze also on Leo, then turning to Olivia. The city's distant murmur faded, replaced by the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of other children, and the peaceful whisper of the wind through the trees. There were no grand words, no elaborate discussions of the past or grand plans for the future. The conversation was light, fragmented, punctuated by the chirping of unseen birds and Leo's joyful shouts. Olivia spoke of a new coding puzzle she was tackling, a challenge that brought a subtle sparkle to her eyes, the joy of creation now untainted by fear. Ethan listened, offering insights, his voice warm and steady, a comforting presence beside her. At one point, Leo stumbled, and both Ethan and Olivia instinctively reached out, their hands brushing as they helped him up, a seamless, unspoken coordination that spoke volumes of their burgeoning bond. Then Leo, breathless and rosy-cheeked, ran back to them, clutching a dandelion puff he'd carefully plucked. He held it out to Olivia. "Mom, make a wish," he exclaimed, his voice bright, full of innocent magic. Olivia knelt, her fingers gently touching the delicate white seeds. She smiled, a full, genuine smile that reached her eyes, illuminating her entire face. She made a silent wish, a simple hope for enduring peace and happiness for her little family, then blew, sending the tiny parachute scattering into the air. Leo giggled, chasing after them, his small figure disappearing into the green expanse, a symbol of endless possibilities. As Olivia rose, her eyes met Ethan's. In that shared glance, a silent understanding passed between them, deeper than any words could convey. It was a recognition of shared battles, of quiet triumphs, and of the fragile, precious peace they had found together. Healing was not complete, for wounds of the soul often leave lingering traces, like the faint lines on an old map. But it was shared, a tender dawn breaking over their lives. They stood bathed in the soft afternoon light, two souls who had found an unexpected home in each other, bound by choice and quiet understanding. It was a nascent family, forged not by blood, but by resilience and profound respect, finding solace in the simplicity of the moment. The world moved on, but for them, in that sun-dappled park, there was only a quiet breath of peace. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that hope can be found in the most surprising moments, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Heartwarming Love Story. We bring you stories that touch the soul, renew your belief in kindness, and highlight what's truly important in life.